For the College of Global Futures. And today we have a special guest, Peggy Brannigan, who has come to join us and wants to just meet some students and share some of her experience and answer some questions and just kind of engage with students a little bit. And this is a great opportunity for you all to ask questions and get information and anything that you would that you can learn. So we appreciate everybody putting this together and Chris making the connection for us. We do have bagels and juice over here for people in person, so please help yourself at any time.
Sorry, online.
Yeah, sorry, you have to watch us drink coffee, but there's plenty, so at any point get up and help yourselves. And I think we do want to keep it fairly informal, so if there's a question or something that you want to ask, on a certain topic, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll make sure that we're watching the chat, that we can grab some questions from there as well. So thanks to everybody who's joining us online. We do have a couple other career events coming up. I know it's almost the end of the semester, but we do have a couple events coming up. We have an alumni panel on April 24th. Which we're really excited about. This is a program that's started by the alumni to connect with students to kind of share their career paths. And then there's going to be a bit of a networking experience after that. And Marion, what was the other event that we have? Networking.
Tonight we have a networking mixer with representatives from Salt River Project, Bernhard, and Bechtel engineering firms.
Yes.
It'll just be on the second floor.
Perfect. I'm getting all my dates mixed up. Everything feels like it's one dull, long day. Absolutely.
Okay, so September 9 through 11, the National Sustainability Society will be hosting its inaugural conference. There's a volunteer opportunity for students. Actually, I just heard from one of the organizers that ASU has submitted the most volunteer applications of any university. So there we go, even beating out UW, which I think is fantastic. We want to paint red, square, maroon, and gold. I've already told the UW people about that. And I'm going to be organizing a panel on sustainability careers, and Peggy just might be joining me. So it'll be a great opportunity for you to meet with employers. It'll be a multi-sector event. There'll be people there from public, private, and nonprofit sectors, as well as colleges and universities. So I encourage all of you to look it up. I'll send around a note through Caroline if you want to learn more about the conference.
Well done, President.
There you go.
Yeah, we'll do what we can to try to
He's the
support,
president of the society.
you know, participation where we can, because it sounds like it's a great opportunity.
And maybe an alumni event associated too, right?
Yep, we may be doing an alumni event as well. Allison is our event coordinator, an alumni coordinator, and she is online, and she'll be managing the online Zoom and chat. Allison, if you get a chance, if you wanted to put some links in the chat for the upcoming events, that would be awesome.
Yep,
We
just
greatly
did that.
appreciate it. And I just also want to acknowledge a couple others that we have in the room. So Christina and Mary, if you could just give a little wave. Christina and Mary are career development specialists for the college. So they meet with students and do our presentations and do all kinds of stuff. So they're really are student facing, and they take appointments, and they're happy to meet with you to talk about your future and everything that you need to know. So they are here in my interject. I also want to say hi to Josh, Director of the School of Sustainability, and of course, Chris, and
Whoever he is.
whoever
Some
Chris
interloper.
is. I don't have the official,
Nobody knows what to call me anymore.
Emeritus
I know.
Director, President of the National
Exactly.
Sustainability Society.
yes, our sustainability jobs guy. There we go.
That's what I'm very
He's
interested
the
in.
one we want to talk to. So before I just sort of hand it over, I did want to see, Josh, did you want to say anything about anything? Okay. Chris, would you want to do a little introduction for Peggy?
I think Peggy should introduce herself.
Okay.
So Peggy, take it away. She's great, by the way, just a short briefing. The great Peggy Brannigan.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, let me just first introduce myself then. I am currently the board chair for the Business Council on Climate Change. That is a membership organization of almost 40 companies across the U.S. who have kind of banded together to collaborate, to share tools, best practices, advocacy, collaboration, so we can move faster, more authentically and effectively together. So that is my exciting new role. But I just a few months ago left an 8-year term as LinkedIn's Director of Sustainability. And I'll talk about that. I have a deck that I've been using to speak with different students like you in different universities, and it's full of data from LinkedIn about what does the green job opportunity landscape look like? What are the key skills? Where are there opportunities kind of in the key sectors that are popping right now? Energy, mobility, finance for sustainability. So all of that you will have because they're going to share that deck afterward. But what they said is no, just talk about your personal journey because all of you guys are right at the cusp of going out and finding your roles in sustainability. And it's always interesting for you to know, how did I get to where I am today? And so I'm going to make it much more personal and I'm going to tell you a story for a few minutes. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions. But I'm just going to tell you a story. And the theme of the story is everybody's journey is different. Mine was not a straight line. I didn't start out aiming here, but everything along the way I learned from, and it brought me to where I am today. So make your career path plan, look at that trajectory, but be sure you're open to responding to opportunities and problems that arise along the way. Life intervenes. And so I'm going to tell you this story, and I'm going to show you 3 times where life intervened and it opened up even more opportunity in the long run. So the first thing to say is, you know, when I started in sustainability, that wasn't even the word we used. It was environment, right? And what we worried about was pollution and waste, the physical things that you could see. And, you know, rivers burning up because of chemical pollution, waste floating on the water, paper that people weren't recycling. So like the big argument might be, do you have to take the staples out of the paper before you put them in the recycle bin? Okay, it just wasn't on our radar that there was this crisis that was even bigger and more existential from all the emissions rising into the atmosphere. And at that time, I cared about sustainability, but really, when I was graduating from high school and looking at college, I wanted to go into poverty alleviation. My goal was I want to be a foreign service officer and help in that way. So I got a college degree in international affairs from GWU, and I was working at the State Department in environment, you know, in the economic research and development area. And then the number one life intervention happened, right? These unexpected things that happen. My beautiful brother, Jim, who was several years older than me, had a hang gliding accident and broke his neck at the C6 and became quadriplegic. So I was just starting out in DC, but somehow I thought I was going to help him. So I you know, changed plans, went out to California, and then spent a year with him, helping him through rehab and getting back into life. And I was broke, and there were no jobs in global poverty alleviation in San Diego, but in San Francisco, there was a job at Wells Fargo Bank in their, you know, credit analysis program. I said, I'm going. Okay, that's close enough. So it turned out to be an incredible blessing in disguise because I thought it was going to be temporary, but it was 7 years. And I worked my way up into a corporate loan officer position. And part of that time I was focused on international. But why was it a blessing in disguise? Because I learned some things that weren't on my radar, but have turned out to be maybe the most important skills. And that was financial accounting. So if you could have, you know, knocked me over with a feather in my undergrad days and said I was going to say I've learned to love accounting. But I'll tell you why I love it. I love the income statements, the balance sheets, the cash flow analysis, because it helps you do 3 things. It helps you make the business case for something in the language that a CFO understands. And later at LinkedIn, that's who I was reporting to. And if I wanted to do a waste program or if I wanted to invest in clean energy, I had to speak his language. So it's very powerful for that. Number 2, it helps you when you're the D, when you're the one making decisions about Where are you going to allocate scarce money, time, and energy? You can look at a portfolio of opportunities because they're all worthy, and you can say, well, this one's going to bring the biggest impact. And it doesn't have, you don't have to use that approach just for impact in terms of dollar return. It can be in terms of people reached, in terms of, problems alleviated, but just that very structured, commonly understood globally language of financial accounting. So it's funny, but I'm really glad that I was immersed in banking for a while. But then I really wanted to move out of the conservative world of banking and into something entrepreneurial and really more focused on social impact. So I went to Stanford, I got an MBA, I met my husband, and I got a certificate in public policy. And I won't dwell too long on this, but I think one of the highlights for me from that experience was all of the students had to go away in the summer between the 2 years and earn money. And I wanted to do something volunteer, and they had a program set up by students where the students that were going off to be Wall Street bankers for the summer, and everybody else put in money to a fund. And then like the 10 of us who wanted to do nonprofit work were able to draw from that fund to have our money for the next year. And I went to Thailand and I worked with the Condom King. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Condom King. He's a MacArthur genius. His name is Michai Viravaidya. He is one of the most widely regarded, thought leaders in the world about poverty alleviation, women's empowerment, and international development. So incredible opportunity I was able to have because of my peers. I got my dream job at Apple, and I felt like I could do well while I was doing good. Because at that time, Steve Jobs, the journey is the reward. We're going to take computing, which had been limited to big computers and, corporate realm, and we're going to bring computing power to every person, every individual on their lap. So I got to go around the world and set up Apple centers, and the highlight for me there involves my husband. I still wanted to have social purpose in my work, and so I was, on a nonprofit helping in international development, and got a note from the Dalai Lama's team. And they said, the Dalai Lama loves Apple because the script for, writing the Tibetan script, you have fewer keystrokes on the Apple. And so, and we're doing some interesting archiving of scrolls and stuff. So I'm like, I'm on this. So I got Apple to donate like 30 computers, and I and my husband, rode through the Punjab at midnight on a train and up these winding trails to the foothills of the Himalaya mountains, and then we're able to do a computer installation there. So that was definitely a highlight, and there, just so many great things. But then life intervention number 2, which involves my husband. His dream all his life had been to be an astronaut, and he worked hard and applied many times, and then finally had the opportunity to go down to Houston and develop a track record there. So when they were thinking about candidates, they would know him in a different way. So I'm thinking, move from California to Houston, leave my job at Apple. Do I really want to do this? But here's the thing. This was my second blessing in disguise for all of you young people. Take the long-term view on your relationships and your family. Because sometimes life is long, you'll have many chapters in your career, and sometimes your career is going to be the one that is primary, and sometimes it might be that the partner's is. And so I moved, I didn't have Apple anymore, so I had to start my own business. And so that turned out to be a blessing, because now when I work with startups, because I'm advising some startups, I know how hard that is in a very personal way. You have to do business development. You have to have your own income statement and balance sheet. I learned, because we were in Houston, a ton about environmental health, safety, specialty chemicals, pollution, right? I was working with those companies. So again, life is going to knock you right off your intended career path, but you're going to learn so much, and you'll never be sorry for prioritizing your family. I mean, the short summary there is my husband was accepted into the Corps, had 4 missions he flew, and so I'm able to be on the launch, at the Launch Control Center on the roof with a couple other people watching him go up into space. I'm gonna cry. Anyway, so it was great. And then The third intervention was a happy one, clearly from the start. After several missions, he had the opportunity for us to move to Europe. So there I am. I don't have a visa to work. I'm a trailing spouse, but what can I do about that? So I spent that time taking environmental sustainability courses online. I went to the UK and took courses. I got certified by GRI and then consulted to GRI. That's the Global Reporting Initiative. I did everything I could as a volunteer, as a student, working, in the different ways. And then there were two jobs that came of that. At the US consulate, I had the chance to establish their sustainability program. And that meant we joined the League of Green Embassies. I sat in on the design planning for the new embassy they were building to make sure it had green building features, energy use of the, staffs at their homes. And then I was able to lead the International School of Amsterdam's sustainability program. And so, that was working with faculty to think about what courses there could be. It was launching the student green teams, the green building expansion, plant forward menus in the cafeteria. There's so many opportunities if you just embrace what life, brings up. And then finally, the last intervention was after 12 years in Europe. We had sick parents who needed us to come home. And so first thing I did, and I will give a shout out to her, is I reached out to a wonderful career counselor and headhunter named Shannon Howda. She has a website called Walk of Life Consulting. She has a lot of free resources that help you figure out where is your niche. I have referred so many people to her, and she's just published a book last year called Good Work, How to Build a Career in Social Impact. So the last name is Houde.
We can maybe send a link around, or when we follow up, I can put that in there, because I've heard of her, and
She's wonderful.
I've seen you mentioned on your PowerPoint, and I'm like,
Yeah, she's wonderful. So and then anyway, I resurrected my consulting business. I consulted to Google for their data center program, because that's their biggest impact, right? Had my own little stable of clients. And then the dream job appeared, LinkedIn. And it was a new position. They didn't have a sustainability program. And this was just 8 years ago. So they were kind of late to the game. But again, it was another opportunity for me to build from the ground up, which is what I love to do. Go in, build the team, build the program, build the goals. So just briefly with LinkedIn, I got hired, and then 3 months later, Microsoft bought us. So I thought, and my friends were laughing. They go, well, you'll probably have a year there, and then they'll just figure all you guys are redundant, because that's how mergers and acquisitions go. And Microsoft has a huge team of sustainability leaders already, but the opposite happened. I had a fantastic 7-year collaboration with some of the best sustainability scientists and economists and practitioners in the world at Microsoft, and we worked very closely together. So in 2020, I had to go to my CFO and chief legal and C-suite and say, we want to join Microsoft in 3 really big, ambitious goals: carbon negative, not neutral, carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste operations by 2030. We didn't know how we were going to do it. We knew we had to build the roadmaps. We knew we really had to redesign the way the companies were going to do business. But we knew, like, from the Science Based Targets Initiative and from other gold standards, that's what we had to do. And so then that meant I established a steering committee across the LinkedIn, teams, with the data center, with the sourcing and procurement team, with the operations team, design and build team, finance team, etc. And so that's really where my focus was the first couple of years at LinkedIn. We had to walk the talk before we were going to try and, preach to anybody else. But early on when I joined LinkedIn, I started trying to play around with the platform a little bit, and I realized it wasn't functioning for the green economy. So I hired a green taxonomist. And that's somebody who works behind the scenes to create all the categories that tag and label and make discoverable and searchable every term. So when you go into your profile and you put in what industry you're in, or you tag skills that you have, or you have a job posting and it, looks at occupations or industries, all of those things, they were not granular enough to reflect even just renewables versus fossil fuel energy. So I I just knew that was a prerequisite to unlock any kind of functionality in the platform. And what I also knew was LinkedIn's footprint is significant. 5 million square feet of real estate, lots of emissions every year from data centers. But the impact I could have in my role was going to be multiplied 50 times over if I could help the platform develop features that would help people like you when you're looking for your green job, or would help people who are working like me and other companies find resources, find talent with green skills. So that was my goal, is like, what can I do on the platform to help the millions of members move faster on climate and more effectively? Because LinkedIn has more mega data than anybody in the world. We have 1 billion members, millions of companies with profiles, millions of jobs there's no other company. And as a sustainability leader, if you find yourself in a company role, that's what you have to ask. You have to say, what is my company's superpower, right? What is it that my company can do that no other company can contribute? So if you're Coca-Cola, you're all about water. If you're Microsoft, you might be about cloud computing, right? If you are Apple, it's all about your components, actually. What you do is you just buy a lot of components and then you assemble them, and it's all about your supply chain. But if you're LinkedIn, it's about your 1 billion members of your community. So that was very exciting. And we did create a green job search function. You'll find that on my deck. I worked with the product managers from LinkedIn Learning to build out a whole bunch of sustainability courses. And they're nothing like the courses that you're giving your students. Because LinkedIn, they're 1 hour courses, they're quick, but they're really good for people in any function who want to have a base level of sufficient understanding of sustainability, so that when they're in that function and they're making decisions, they understand what the environmental impacts of those decisions are. So there's over 100 courses now, which is really, I'm very proud of that actually, because it was hard. When I first started working with the product team, they're like, there's not really too much demand for this. We got to go where the demand is. It's like, how do you write software, But over time, that demand has risen, and now this woman's on fire. And then we launched something else you guys should check out, which is called LinkedIn Top Voices Green. And that's kind of the other superpower of the platform, right? Not just to deliver online learning or deliver green data insights about the green economy, but it's to give a microphone or like a megaphone to all the thought leaders, not just in the US, but all around the world who are coming up with solutions. And LinkedIn has the opportunity to elevate the visibility of that. And so this Top Voices Green, those links are in the deck too. There's and it's basically people who are active on LinkedIn posting in different countries, but it's all about solutions for climate. And then we partnered with a bunch of amazing NGOs because we really wanted to address the climate equity and climate justice piece. What we want is a much broader on-ramp into opportunities in green. And particularly for people on the front line in these marginalized communities that are suffering already the most. We want to make sure that because LinkedIn could also be a platform to exaggerate and exacerbate existing biases, right? Especially with AI. So you have to intentionally fight against that and find ways to, open the doors more broadly for people. You asked me to talk a little bit about, challenges for people in sustainability roles. And I think they're all small teams in general with big aspirations. So it's stressful because you might wake up at 3 in the morning thinking I should also be doing this, but you have to just triage it to avoid burnout. And then honestly, the role of a change maker, if you're in a company in a sustainability role, by definition, your job is to change the way that company does business. And that is very irritating to everybody else because they're happy. And so what I did when I joined LinkedIn and they didn't have any program is I spent the first year meeting with all the people I knew I had to get on board. And that first meeting, I just said, Mike Yamaguchi from Data Center Ops, tell me about your job. What are you responsible for? What does your boss expect? At the end of this year, for you to be considered successful and get a great performance review, what do you have to do? So I could understand site reliability, that platform can't go down, cost, Just being able to find, we co-lease, we leased our data center space, so just be able to sign a lease because there was so much demand. So those were the things top of his mind, not how much water the data centers were using for cooling, not, how much energy and was it green or not. I basically, Mike was very hard to tie down. He was everywhere. And this is when everybody was in the offices in person. I was in a different building. But like once a week, I would just go over and sit outside his office and just wait for him to come by in between meetings. I'm like, Mike, can I just talk to you for a minute? So I was trying to make it easy for him to participate and also to come on board and educate. And so I guess, to answer your question, a challenge is getting their attention and getting them to prioritize it in line with all these other criteria that they have to meet for their job. And then challenges specifically at LinkedIn, for me as a team lead, I had a very broad mandate. So I came in as a generalist. My angle of entry was MBA, portfolio approach. We got to achieve these goals and how do we invest? What kinds of programs do we do? I'm not a scientist, but I studied climate science, but that wasn't my angle in. I also, because I wanted to also make the platform play, I had to be working across the entire company. So I had 2 steercos, one with all the operations, and then a second one I set up with engineering and product management and the coders and marketing and sales, so we could take all those tools we were building for green and get that out there. And so that just in any given day I would have 8 calls and half would be about one, half the others, just kind of pivot. And then some climate pledges compete with each other. So, okay, we have this great goal of carbon negative by 2030. So what does that mean? First, you drive down efficiencies, right? Use as little as you have to. Code things properly so that tasks are processed efficiently. Turn out the lights, all those things to drive efficiencies. And then buy green power. But for the data centers, water is a very powerful tool for cooling. But that immediately disrupts the water positive pledge, right? Because you're using lots of gallons of water. So, just that skill of okay, how do you parse those out and help prioritize where we want to focus. So I think the last thing you asked me to talk about was, what do you think the future of green careers look like? And there's a lot of that in the deck. So I'll just say, first of all, you can have green work to do in any function. So don't feel like you have to get a job in a central sustainability team like mine. Those are small, and those are mainly at the very large companies. What's more important, if we're going to move the whole global economy quickly, is that in every function, the people in that function are doing it in a green way, right? And so, and that's what we're seeing on LinkedIn. If you look at the green hiring that's happened over the last couple of years, good news for all of you guys is green hiring is happening way faster than hiring in general on our platform. So that's a real statistic that jobs requiring some green skills have grown 9% every year for the last 7 years. And if you look at hiring for green work versus hiring for all work, is about a 20% average differential. That's powerful. That's helpful for you guys. But then you say, well, where do I fit in there, right? Okay, so I think, first of all, I would say this is a great role, but I think you want to step back and say, which sector maybe do I think I'm most comfortable in, right? And I've worked in all of them. I've been in the school, I've been in the government, I've been in business, I did a little work with the nonprofit, and they're very different. And so, if you just, and you all are, you've come into this program with some experience, but, just some thoughts there. In corporate, you might have a lot of resources and, prestige and, power, but you also are in a company who has a requirement to shareholders to, drive a financial profit. So you a lot of times will have to influence without authority, and you can't be a purist. You can try, and that's your role, to be the conscience, but you really have to pick your battles. and, maybe compromise or say this, we're gonna put on a slower track than that because this for our company is the most material impact. So that's hard. That's very hard. In the nonprofit and academic world, you can be more of a purist. That is your role. This is the truth. This is where we need to go. You can delve deep into a particular area of sustainability. The challenge is you might have less limited resources and you might have really important information that the world needs, but it's hard sometimes to figure out how do you get that out there to the players in the world that are going to do something about it? How do you operationalize it? How do you get companies to adopt the new best practices you've discovered? All of that. I'm sure that this group has some other things you could share about the opportunities. And then in the public sector, wow, what a great moment to be in the public sector, right? World precedent-setting investment by the United States in climate this last year. And I'm on the end of some of that, watching some of that being spent. Those dollars are being spent right now. One of my friends is part of a coalition that just got $7 billion from the U.S. government, working with some nonprofits and some government entities. And it's so exciting. So the upside is that there's a lot of momentum from the IRA and the infrastructure regulation or legislation, billions of dollars for systems level climate. And we all know that's what we need, right? So because there's some bureaucracy, there's not always a lot of accountability and might be slower pace in terms of getting things out. But I do think, Holly Elwood at the EPA is someone I've been connected with for a long time. And I just love, you should follow her. She's a great example if you're interested in a government job in climate. And then, so think about your sector. And you probably through your career move through different sectors. Look what Chris is doing now, right? But the other thing is think about your particular superpower, because your angle of entry can't just be, I know X amount about climate, right? Has to be, well, what are you going to do with that, what you know, right? So think about me. I come in from a business angle. That's what I love, and I want to just, allocate resources and make things happen. But maybe you're the person who's a social media amazing whiz, right? And you're going to tell the story, and that's what we're really lacking. If you look at this election coming up, environment's not even on the top 5 when you ask people what are their main things they're voting. There's an organization called Environmental Voter Project, and I'm connecting with them right now because there's a lot of environmental voters who don't always vote, okay? So we need more people to tell the story in a way that's going to draw people in, and we know it's not the doom and gloom. It's like, hey, here's a solution, or hey, this celebrity is doing this and this is cool, So how do you get people's attention and get them to move? Maybe it's data analysis. The biggest area of hiring right now by far is data collection, data analysis, data reporting. And that's because, you have here in the US, the SEC, at least they're asking for scope 1 and 2 disclosures. Scope 3 is coming. It's just that the accounting doesn't exist properly. It's not SASB fit, but it's coming. So in the States, this is happening. And even for LinkedIn, even if this wasn't happening in the States, we're gearing up for a lot more data analysis, measuring, because we have our biggest subsidiary in Dublin and the European Union. It's happening. It's rolling out 2025. It's a lot more disclosure about not just scope 1, 2, and 3, but biodiversity impacts, things like that. So, maybe that's you. Maybe it's education. Maybe you want to, continue to spread the word. Anyway, think about that. And then build your network of peers and allies while you're here. Share. It's a give and take. It's not all take, right? What can you do for them? And then what can they do for you? Constant learning. I wake up every day thinking, what's new? This field is like no other field. It's evolving so quickly. What we thought was true last year is not. And the unintended consequences, some tactics we've taken are now appearing, so you have to be comfortable constantly learning and changing your mind and owning up to, this is a lesson we've learned. Some of the particular areas where I think there's a lot of, where we know from LinkedIn data, right? Let's just say there's more opportunity. So clearly energy, right? Renewables. In the US, clean tech investments were a record high last year and jumped 38%. But some of the biggest investments there went to things like hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, carbon capture technologies, which we can debate the wisdom of that or not. In terms of transportation, EV sales were not so bad last year. Yes, there's some companies on the brink of bankruptcy, but this is a whole new field. EV sales grew 50% in the US last year. That's huge. And all brands are offering EVs. And actually there, that, you know, and there's the shipping and trucking and all that, but one of the interesting areas where we are seeing a lot of growth is what they call micro-mobility in transportation, where you have like IKEA, UPS, Volta trucks, Amazon, they're designing the more fuel-efficient delivery routes and vehicles for that. So lots of application. And then, like I mentioned, in agriculture, huge impact. We don't hear enough. Gosh, I'm sorry, I can't remember. Brandon, you mentioned agriculture, food. We talk a lot about, you know, smokestack carbon, but the food industry is, you know, just so much waste, so much water use, so much carbon emissions, so much biodiversity destruction, right? Because of the loss of habitat and the pollution from the pesticides. So a lot of opportunity there in alternative proteins, regenerative farming, AI, okay? And I have to say that because I'm a Microsoft alumni, but AI is going to be huge. And yes, it's going to generate a lot of emissions from those data centers and that scope 3 bigger IT equipment we're going to purchase and all. Yes, but it's going to allow tracking, monitoring, you know, capturing billions of items of data and very quickly, you know, figuring things out. So it can be part of very powerful planetary solutions. So if you like AI, go deep there because it's happening. Natural capital credits, which is something near and dear to my heart. I'm really concerned about biodiversity. If you haven't read The Sixth Mass Extinction or Under a White Sky by Elizabeth Colbert, you should. And she just came out with a new one called H is for Hope, which is also worth a look. But yeah, it's happening. It's happening on our watch. We're losing so many species, net loss, right? Some loss is normal. But natural capital credits are becoming a thing. In my corporate role, you know, we bought carbon offsets. We invested in watersheds for water positive, but we hadn't yet been required to address biodiversity impacts. But if you're in an extractive industry or a consumer product industry, that's on your radar now. You're looking at natural capital credits, and I'm talking right now with some startups that are doing some interesting things there, and then food waste. And then finally, my realm, finance, the new thing is the ESG controller. And so that's why in the beginning of this talk I said, no matter where you think you're headed in sustainability, it's worth it to take a finance class, basic accounting, because that is the language we're going to be speaking. Microsoft just hired an ESG controller. Many companies are now hiring for that role because now when we're reporting publicly, it's audited by Deloitte or it's audited by PwC, and it goes through the finance function, not operations or marketing, where, you know, some other teams sit, or legal, where some other teams sit. It's in finance. So you got to, you know, it would serve you well to be conversant there. So last thing I would say is, you know, hold on to your sense of humor. If you're going in this field, you're a change maker. Find the laughs, find the, you know, respect for the stakeholders that you're going to be working with, and then, but be persistent. Don't be apologetic. They hired you to do this job. And so, you know, help your organization wherever you land go green. You can be polite, but you can be assertive. I just want to congratulate you all because I think you realize that you are sitting in one of the best sustainability education programs in the world here, this program.
And say that again, I'll get you on video.
And so that's so powerful. So if, you know, so take everything you're learning here and go out and aim high. Aim for big impacts, you know, but also take the long run view and know that you might have some segues in your path that you didn't expect, but wherever you find yourself planted, you know, find a way to take this passion you have and make a difference this decade, because this is the time right now. It's go time. So that's kind of what I wanted to share. And I think we have time for questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And let's get some questions. Does anybody in the room have a question? Okay. Would you like to just maybe say your name and your degree would be great too.
Yeah, sure. Hello, my name is Kennedy. I am a junior here studying sustainability. And my question to you is, you were talking about you spent some time in Europe. So I was just wondering, what are the differences between living in the US versus Europe? And are there any things like people should be aware of if they want to go live abroad?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to get a work visa. And that was my challenge when I first got there. And then fortunately, Amsterdam, where I ended up, they have more liberal. But that's one thing. No, so I'll address it more from a personal standpoint first. What did I find different? We were there 12 years, and maybe Steve wants to chime in too, but it's a whole different kind of mindset about the community. And, it's mostly social capitalism, so there's much more of a safety net. Our healthcare and the education system over there are more kind of just basic rights and services that are provided more equitably. And we all know that, right? But it was interesting to experience that and kind of like look wistfully back at the US and say, gosh, we're really missing the big picture on this. And then, they were farther ahead, quicker, especially Europe, they have their own Green Deal going now. They're ahead on all the regulations, legislation. And so, wow, that was fun to be there and get energized by all of that. Let's see, what else can I say? I think there's a lot of innovation happening there, but I think the innovation happens more here in the States, honestly. And I'm not sure why, but it's a bit more of a Wild West here, but there is just so I see a lot of, and I know that the initial marketplace is much bigger here in the US, right? So I think the innovation that happens in Europe, a lot of it then gets transplanted over here for the funding from, Sandhill investors or whoever, right? The money's here. And then also the initial big market here. So you do see that happening.
I just wanted to chime in real quick because you raised a really good point. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer, so I feel obligated to mention this opportunity. I went to the Peace Corps after undergraduate to kind of figure things out. I wanted to get international experience. I wanted to learn another language. I wanted to be under the auspices of the US government while I was in a foreign country. But that is something to consider depending on your age. You get 2 years of international experience, which is something you want under your belt if you're going to work in international development or for a company, that wants to send you abroad. They want to see that experience. You learn another language. They train you. Just putting it out there is consider that opportunity.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have an authorization to go to another country and work. You can really get embedded in a community, do amazing work. I mean, I could do a whole thing on it. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe another question. Oh, I see a hand raised on Zoom. Can we get that question? Michaela?
Hi there. My name is Michaela. I'm an alumni. I majored in business sustainability and education. So your story speaks to me a lot. I've actually been working in banking for the past 3 years. So I'm trying to make that transition into sustainability, and it's been a little bit frustrating. But I guess my question to you is, I've been considering getting my MBA to kind of open those doors. Do you think that's valued more in the sustainability realm, just to get more education within the MBA, or do you think that'd be something to focus on more with a master's of sustainability?
Okay, so do you have any educational background in sustainability?
My undergrad was business.
Your undergrad. Oh, okay. Gosh, so I'm gonna not directly answer that because there's so many factors I don't know that are gonna go into your decision about opportunity lost. If you go away from the workforce for 2 years for an MBA, you've lost that, whatever experience and income you might have had. But, statistics do show on the other end, you kind of might earn that back. And the relationships you would make in the MBA program, those are for Steve and me. I met him, so that was a win. And then all the people that I reach out to for expert advice and stuff, many of those are my colleagues from my cohort in the MBA. So it's not just what you learn in the classroom. with an MBA. It's all those relationships. But what I wanted to just tell you briefly how you might think about this. So I didn't mention it, but right now, if you're a corporate sustainability leader, you know, over the years, the scope of what you are responsible for has grown from like your initial footprint from your buildings to, you know, your supply chain impacts and all the procurement you do and the footprint from that to, well, what about the footprint from users of your product and consumers? But guess what the next circle is that now is on everybody's radar in corporate sustainability? It's your financial footprint. And so there's an organization called Ceres, CERES, and Mindy Libbers heads it up, and they are very vocal and kind of activist, calling out companies to say, hey, you're ignoring your biggest footprint because you have like $4 billion in banks. And guess what? Those 3 banks are funding, they are bankrolling deeper, you know, drilling, natural gas, and, you know, they've got all the fossil fuel companies. So that, you know, there's 23 companies in the world that are responsible for most of the emissions, and they're oil and gas and, you know, oil field services and fossil fuel based, right? But if you look at Bank of America and Chase and Morgan Stanley, Morgan, Citibank, if you just take the top 5 banks in the world, Deutsche, right? They're the ones giving the loans and the lines of credit to those companies to operate. And so this movement now is to say that's enabling a lot more emissions when we're supposed to be bending the curve down, right? Because you know last year emissions went up again, right? We had a little dip during the pandemic, but now emissions are headed up. So all of you have to raise your hand and like help us bend that curve back down. And banks are in the, you know, target right now. So I just say that, so if you kind of educate yourself about that, you know, aspect, what a company like LinkedIn would have to do is change its banking relationships. And that's very difficult because you have a lot of monetary transactions that involve inter-country, and you have deposit and transaction level limits that some of these smaller greener banks can't comply with. So then if you're going to go away from the big banks, you have to break this. So if you have like banking, correspondent banking or banking, you know, whatever you have, whatever banking experience you have, it might be applicable in some way to helping some of these companies try and figure that out. And then otherwise, I've told you what I felt were my biggest benefits from an MBA. And, you know, one thing that you can all do that Shannon Howda from Walk of Life Consulting told me to do when I knew I was moving back from Europe, had been gone 12 years, didn't have my network, didn't know where to go. She said, go on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever your preferred platform is, find 5 jobs that you would love to do. They would be your dream jobs. Put together a spreadsheet and just write down, you know, in like, what are the key skills they're looking for? What are the key academics they're asking you to have? And then another column with what you currently have, and then you'll have your gap analysis and you'll say, okay, if these are the jobs I'm aiming for, this is currently what the employers are looking for. And it's just a very practical way maybe to help you answer that question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I see that in a lot of job postings and things we're looking for, like sustainable finance,
Yeah.
you know, investments. I mean, it's
Yeah.
huge. So if you have that background, it sounds like it would be really valuable.
Yeah, because outside of banking or the companies, you know, there's all the investment opportunities, right? And if you're interested in that angle, like where are the dollars being invested versus where they should? Jonathan Foley from Drawdown. How many of you know about Drawdown? Yeah, I'm sure you do, right?
He's
Guys?
going to be one of our keynotes at the
Oh,
conferences, yeah.
Awesome.
There we go.
Okay, so I know Jonathan very well. I hired people from his team to help when we were redoing LinkedIn's taxonomy, right? But he's come out recently, I don't know, it was maybe 6 months ago, with this schema that said, if we were just to step back and say, if we only have so much money and we're gonna deploy it across different sectors and solutions for climate, here's the proper breakout. Like, here's the ideal breakout. Some would be in mobility and EVs, some would be in clean energy, some would be in like the hard to abate sectors, some, you know, and so that's the drawdown recommended. And then he shows you like, where's philanthropy investing? Where's the US government's IRA and infrastructure investment going? Where are venture capitalists investing? That might, Michaela, that might be interesting for you to look at too. And you guys can find that. He posted it in a post on LinkedIn, but it might be on the Drawdown website too.
Did we have another question in the room? Okay.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a PhD student here. And my career path is shaping up to be an academic one. I was wondering from your experience with multiple different sectors, one of the popular kind of buzzwords that floats around, especially sustainability schools these days, is transdisciplinary research, where we're supposed to produce research that's collaborative outside of the academy, incorporating people where the research may actually be beneficial. And so I was wondering, in your experience, how you perceive the academy, and I'm painting with a broad brush here, is doing better in that transdisciplinary research, or what is perhaps the gap that that industry needs from the academy?
Gosh, I'm gonna start by saying I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer this because that wasn't really part of what I was looking at. We were partnering more with nonprofits. So I will just give a short answer and then maybe ask Chris, because I think he might be better equipped to answer that. But I can say some of my peers like Kate Brandt at Google and the whole Alphabet team, they're partnering a lot with different universities to go to where the expertise is in the science, where they're trying. And also at Microsoft, they set up a $1 billion loan and equity fund, and it involves partnerships, mostly with startups, but with some academic institutions as well, to try to take these things that you're coming up with and actually, implement them, test them, pilot them. But I'm gonna turn that question over to you, Chris, if that's okay.
Sure, and I'll also advertise that Kate Brandt's on our advisory committee for the National.
Oh, I love
Sustainability
Kate.
Society. So any chance I get to plug the meeting, I'm gonna do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, Kate's really good.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So Adam, it's a great question, and I think you know that traditionally universities have done a very poor job at doing transdisciplinary research. And one of the things that I think is really exciting about sustainability is that it is inherently an effort to do transdisciplinary work, because we recognize that it's not just about understanding the nature of complex problems, but how do we intervene in those problems to build a better future. And from our stance as academic institutions, we can have some impact in that realm, mostly actually by educating students and unleashing them onto the world and going out and getting these great positions and then having impact in that way. But there's also increasingly a recognition that we need to be responsible, as our charter says at ASU, for the overall well-being of the communities that we serve. And that's a really important motivator, but it's also just a necessary condition, right? In the realm that we're living in now, with the urgency of the issues that we're facing, more universities need to step up to the plate and start to engage with external partners, stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, in order to address these really urgent issues. So basic research, knowledge creation is always going to be an important service of the university, but we're finding when we talk to other colleges and universities, especially again in the sustainability space, that idea of transdisciplinary approaches is fundamental to what we should do. It's also fundamental to what most of us want to do.
Thank you, Chris. Good luck. It's important. It's important. I mean, in the end, whatever we do has to be based on good science and good analysis, right? And, yeah.
We're about out of time, but I think we could probably do another question. Okay.
Well, thank you for your time. For edification, my name is Brandon Russell. I'm a returning undergrad, or undergraduate, I should say, to the School of Sustainability and the College of Global Futures. Michaela's question and the conversation, I originally wanted to talk a little bit about your advice in terms of communicating on hierarchies, but you've done well to describe that in terms of getting outside somebody's office and taking 30 seconds of their time.
I'm not going away, Chris.
So for me, thank you for this time. And I'd like to know more, and we only have 2 minutes, but about how your career path maybe came to interact with the Bureau of Economic Analysis.
It's at the State Department.
And maybe how the information quality guidelines from there have been an influence in your career.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was there a long time ago, but at the State Department, at the time, we were looking at like, economic trends in emerging economies. And my specific focus was, interesting, it was expropriation and nationalization of US assets overseas. So not really related to
Okay.
that, but it was part of that Bureau of Economic Affairs. And then within that, I think it's a department that doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, so I guess I can't really answer that one for you.
I guess what I'm saying, getting at is how to expand we're great in sustainability, you know, and in terms of those information quality guidelines, you touched on data a little bit.
Yeah,
And your audits with Deloitte.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah. No,
They're all kind of guided by that. And
Right.
That's where I'm trying to be a little stronger, is understanding those information quality guidelines. of the VA,
So I'll just speak to
CPA.
what I know, which is at LinkedIn, I had a team, and this will probably be a good way to end too, because you can know kind of how does a corporate team grow over time. First it was me, generalist. Then we had to start getting utility bills and track our kilowatt hours of energy and our volume of water use, right? So get those utility bills in, run them through a spreadsheet with emissions factors or, different things to calculate, how do you take the kilowatt hours and turn them into carbon estimates? And then working with our procurement team, do a data pull. What did we buy last year? What industry code did it have? What's the emission factor for that code? The goal there, longer term, is that's terrible quality, right? Because you get penalized. If you buy a more expensive green alternative product, you're paying more. And so the math works out that your emissions are higher because you just have, so the whole emphasis on scope 3 now is to move away from spend-based data to life cycle analysis. That particular product and what was the, whole life cycle. So we went there. So as I built out a team with those 3 big targets, carbon negative, I hired someone to be on that. Then water positive, I hired someone to focus on water. Zero waste, I was just in LinkedIn office having lunch with her. She's doing the true zero waste audit certification for our San Francisco office. So in each of those cases, it's all about data, right? It's like, we weighed the food that we were throwing out. So it's whatever the element is you're tracking, there has to be a data a data point for it. And then the way it works for us is we are part of Microsoft's consolidated environmental sustainability report. We weren't allowed to report separately because LinkedIn was just a division of Microsoft, actually. And so that data all goes up to them. And then my team would be waiting because then they'd be getting the emails from the Deloitte team. For this date, this data, can you provide the documentary evidence? So it's they take it seriously, right? And I don't know if you've been kind of tracking all the things happening at CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, or at SBTI, but there's a lot of conversation on LinkedIn anyway about truth and science and data and real impacts. And the audits are serious because last year, I know I was tracking, Deutsche Bank was sued by the government for misrepresenting the quality of the greenness of some of the assets in its portfolio. A couple of the airlines were, I think there was an FBI raid to get some data documentation for some of the claims about sustainable aviation fuel. So this greenwashing is now under legal scrutiny. And so it just comes back to, this is a great question you asked, because the data quality, in the end, it has to be there because any company who's publishing something is vulnerable to scrutiny that could lead to lawsuits.
Thank you for bringing attention to that. And
Yeah.
I look forward to what
Yeah.
kind of.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you. Let's thank our
Okay.
speaker again. We will send a follow-up email out. Thank you so much for joining us on Zoom. We appreciate it. And for those of you here, grab a bagel, and we might have another minute or two to have a chit chat here. So thank you so much.
And we're going to lunch. Are we going to lunch?
I didn't get a response.
Oh.